the time where I entered the hangar, I witnessed recovered alien spacecraft that the Department of Naval Intelligence in the United States was back engineering.
He was a U.S. federal marshal, and he was sent into the area to pick up a man, a fugitive. When he got to the gate at Groom Lake, they led him on to make the arrest, but they required an escort with him. And then first they searched him, and then they assigned an escort, and when they prepared to leave, the escort handed him a black bag. He says, "Put it in your belt here," because if a siren sounds, we pull the bag over our head and lay down on the ground face down and wait till there's an all clear. He says there are things here that are very secret and they can't be seen. So the man says, "Well, what happens if somebody looks up? If you don't stay down there?" They said they're shot on the spot, and ask questions afterwards.
I have had the opportunity over the years to interview, again, people who have worked at the test site at Groom Lake. One gentleman spent 12 of his 30 years in black programs at Groom Lake. When I asked him, I said, first of all, I said, "Do you believe in UFOs?" And he looked at me with a straight face in one-on-one. He said, "Absolutely, positively, they do exist." I said, "Can you expand upon that?" And he said, "No, I can't." About a year later, we were talking about, again, activities at Groom Lake. And I asked him, I said, can you really tell me what's happening out there? And he said, "Well, there's a lot of things that are going on there that I won't be able to tell you until the year 2025. But we have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious."
We are here at one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Behind these mountains begins the Black World, the super-secret U.S. Navy and Air Force test site known as Area 51. Rumors say that right here the test flights with craft from another world recovered by the military take place. In this film we investigate these rumors, and were at the end able to observe one of those mysterious UFOs by ourselves, right here, near the black mailbox at the desert road to Groom Lake.
This is a Nevada test site. The area comprises about 10,000 square miles. It's bordered on the south by Mercury, and on the west side by Highway 95, and up here on the northwest by Tonopah, and across the top to Crystal Springs, and down here to Las Vegas. This area right here is the Department of Energy nuclear underground testing area, with all their areas labeled there. This is called the Yucca Strip. Up here is the Tonopah test range where the F-117 used to fly out of, and now there's other secret programs going on up there. This area all across the north here is used for the Red Flag exercises, which is the Air Force equivalent to the Navy's Top Gun exercises. They come out of Nellis Air Force Base here and fly this whole area. Right dead center of the test site is what is known as Area 51, also known as Watertown, also known as the Ranch. At the very center is Groom Lake. It's about 10 miles on each side, and this is where most of the secret activity goes on. Just 10 miles south of the Groom Lake complex is an even more secret area. This is where the saucers, the discs, are flown, an area called S4. There's 9 hangars inside the mountain, and the discs are flown up the Emigrant Valley, up in this area. They're flown like that. And this is where they can be seen from this road, Mailbox Road, which is right here. It's about 14 miles from there to where you see the discs. Up in this area up here is the Tonopah test range, and one of the workers up there at this lake right here one day saw a big door open in the dry bed of the lake and a disc come out of there. Area 51 was basically a Navy training base until 1955, when, in conjunction with the CIA, Lockheed made a secret test base out of it. And the reason was to test the U-2. In 1959, 60, and 61, they also tested the SR-71 out of there, and it became a perfect area in which to test secret equipment and secret airplanes. So it was, because it was so remote, it was bounded on all sides by mountains, and it was essentially a million miles from nowhere. The security that it provided was just exactly what they needed. After 1960, it became a area to test not only planes, but equipment, machinery, all kinds of secret things that they had. In 1972, there is, according to my research, a complete blackout of detailed information, records, what have you, for a period of 18 months. Nobody knows what happens between the summer of '82 and I think it was summer of '72 and January of '74. There's absolutely no records. I talk to security guards. They don't know what happened there. I don't know what happened there. I don't really have any suspicions, because the flying saucer program began, Project Red Light began, it's my information, in earnest at Groom Lake in 1960. They did attempt to fly one or two of the craft. There was a major accident, and the testing operations shut down for a number of years. The testing operations began in earnest again, I believe, in 1980, 81, 82, around that area. And the reason I say that is because the security increased drastically during that period. And I believe that just south of Groom Lake, which is in the northeast corner of the Nevada test site, is a place called Papoose Lake. It's a dry lake. There's a secret area there called S4, and I believe that that's where they test the saucers out of. My sources are varied, but the primary source being Bob Lazar, who worked on one of the 9 saucers that were stored there.
Colonel Stevens, you investigated rumors about the top secret flying saucer investigation project in Area 51.
Yes, the rumors became a little more real to me in about 1978, when I discovered my first participant in the changeover of that base to a very special facility, where they took up the runway and laid in underground facilities and special laboratories, and then relayed it and reconstructed the base to make it look just like it did before. The material that is now stored at Area 51, I believe, came from the Roswell crash in 1947, a crash at Aztec, New Mexico in 1948, and another crash down along the Mexican border in about 1949 or 50. The residue was first taken to Los Alamos and to other areas in New Mexico under the control of the Atomic Energy Commission, also super secret facilities. They were smaller, and I believe that the real facility was constructed at Area 51 when they changed over Groom Field to, it was a field on a dry lake bed, when they changed it over to become a special research facility. And I believe they transported the material that had been collected and held elsewhere to Area 51 about that time, at least much of it, for the research projects. Now that changeover began in about 1948, 47 or 48, probably early 48, when they modified the field, changed over the building and the facilities, and put in a habitat where they could control an atmosphere for extraterrestrial guests, is my supposition now. And they also put in laboratories for research. And it's been expanded, been worked and expanded almost since that time.
You got confirmation from the military, didn't you?
Yes, one in particular comes to mind. Now, he's not in the military, but he ran several large military research programs here in Nevada. Very top-level programs, the highest classification. This is a person from a very prominent Nevada family, well known, it's provable where he worked and the kinds of things that he did. He also confirms that the alien technology has been in Nevada since the early 1950s, that it was even here before the base at Groom Lake was built, that one of the reasons that the Groom facility was built is in order to test this alien technology. He told me that there was a live alien in custody for a number of years, that they had difficulty communicating with the alien at first, but eventually developed some sort of a communication abilities. He is reluctant to talk. He's worried about what will happen to his family, but he has agreed to give me a videotaped deposition that would be released only after his death. And I think when that comes out, it will not only confirm what Bob Lazar had to say, but shed a great deal of light on what our military, what our government has known about the alien presence for the past 45 years, including Roswell.
Las Vegas, Nevada, city of gambling, city of the thousand lights, and, what only a few know, gate to a world full of military secrets. Here we started our investigation into the mysteries of the Black World, because behind the mountains north to the glitter town begins the Nevada test site, nearly a state by its own, surrounded by borders safer than any other border on Earth since the Iron Curtain came down. Nuclear weapons are tested here, the stealth fighter was hidden here, and much more exotic planes are flown today. Our quest brought us to John Lear, one of the most successful and experienced pilots in the United States. The son of the legendary airplane designer William P. Lear has flown in over 16,000 hours, more than 160 different types of aircraft in over 50 different countries, holds 17 world speed records, and is the only pilot ever to hold every airman certificate issued by the Federal Aviation Administration. Since the Vietnam War, he has flown missions worldwide for the CIA and other government agencies, as well as many different experimental planes for the Navy and Air Force. Other insiders have told Lear about the secret UFO test flights in Area 51. But in 1988, these rumors became reality for him after he met a young nuclear physicist, Robert Lazar.
In the summer of 1988, I was having this house appraised. And the appraiser brought along, the appraiser was interested in UFOs, and he brought along a friend of his who was a scientist, former scientist at Los Alamos. The appraiser, being interested in UFOs, wanted the opinion of this scientist on UFOs. And at that time I was doing a lot of lecturing. There was a lot of publicity about me and UFOs in the summer of '88. So I met this gentleman, Bob Lazar, and he didn't believe it at all. He told me that he worked at Los Alamos on SDI. He had a Q clearance. He had a number of other compartmentalized clearances. He knew a lot of secret things. He said that if there had been something like this, some cover-up, that he would have known about it. So over the next 3 or 4 months, we got to know Bob very well. He got to know us, and we passed him various information, which he checked out with the people that he knew that still worked at Los Alamos, specifically people who had access to the classified library. I told him that Project Grudge, which the Air Force told the public was canceled in 1949, was still active. He was able to determine through his friends who had access to the classified library at Los Alamos that it was still going on. There was another thing that I had mentioned, that one of the aliens that we had captured were kept at a secret place called a YY-2 facility. He in fact found out that there was a classified mail stop at Los Alamos called YY-2. Now that doesn't mean they kept aliens there, but it showed that I knew secret things that were going on. There was enough evidence there that he thought, well, maybe there is something to this, and he wanted to find out. So having the specialized, highly educated person that he was. He held 2 degrees, master's degrees from MIT, and also knowing Dr. Teller, who was the father of the H-bomb, he was able to send his resume to Dr. Teller, who then called him and asked him where he wanted to work. Dr. Teller proposed 2 places, either EG&G in Las Vegas or Lawrence Livermore Laboratories in California. Bob said, I want to work at Area 51. He didn't tell Dr. Teller the reason, but he wanted to get as close as he could to where we thought the saucer testing was going on. Well, during the next 6 weeks after that, he was contacted by EG&G. He was given 3 security interviews and 3 interviews on his basic knowledge. They were so impressed that apparently they went ahead and hired him. The first thing that I knew is on December 6, 1988, Bob came up here as he usually did in the evening. I was sitting here writing checks, and he sat right in that seat. And I said, what's going on, Bob? And he said, I saw a disc today. And I said, I was so startled, I thought I didn't hear him right. I said, what? And he said, I saw a disc today. And I said, theirs or ours? And he said, theirs. And I said, you went to the test site? He said, yeah, I just got back. This is the first time I went up there. I said, oh, my God. I said, well, what are you doing here? I said, don't jeopardize your security clearance. Work up there for a while and find out what's going on. He said, no. He said, you've taken so much flack over this thing, people not believing you. I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw. And for the next 3 hours and 47 minutes, he proceeded to tell me exactly what he saw on his first trip up to S4 at the Nevada test site. And basically it was that, yes, we had 9 extraterrestrial vehicles. He told me a little bit about the power plants. He told me that he'd been briefed on the aliens that flew them. He told me that he'd been briefed on a number of other secret things. He told me that we in fact did have a secret base on the moon. He told me that we in fact did have a secret base on Mars. A number of things, some of which were so unbelievable, had I not known Bob to be truthful, I would have been very suspect. But I had known him for this period of time, and I had no reason to believe that he would tell me anything other but the truth.
Well, I had met Ed Teller at Los Alamos one day. We had a brief meeting and a talk. I had shortly thereafter moved to Las Vegas and basically left the scientific community to do other work. Sometime later I decided to re-enter and send applications out to several other national labs, and also one to Ed Teller, and he gave me a call and he said he might have something that I'd be interested in, and suggested that I go for an interview. Shortly thereafter, someone from EG&G called and told me to come down for an interview there. They made it very clear that EG&G had nothing to do with it. They were just using the building as a place to do the interview. After a short time, they said I was basically overqualified for the position, but they may have something else in the future. And I don't remember how much time lapsed after that, but shortly thereafter, they asked me to come down for another interview, and they said this was involving I don't remember their exact wording, but they led me to believe it was a field propulsion system, and of course I thought it was something that, in secret, that we were working on. Later, only did I find out that it was a back engineering program dealing with alien craft. I flew out of Las Vegas McCarran Airport, and I flew to Groom Lake in a 737 aircraft. We land at Groom Lake, and there's a bus there that drives about 15 miles south, approximately. I'm really not sure exactly how far, down to a smaller dry lake bed known as Papoose Lake. And right up against the side of the mountain is the S4 installation.
And what happened to you first when you entered it? How did they receive you?
It was very military-like. It was certainly not a scientific atmosphere. Very high security. Everywhere you walked, you had to have an escort, an armed escort, even into the bathroom. All doors lock and open with your badge, and It was a very oppressive atmosphere.
How many times did you spend on this atmosphere before you saw the craft for the first time?
I believe I was only there 2 or 3 days, probably 2 days before I saw the craft.
Time, how they are stored, what your impression was, and your feelings when you saw it.
Well, my feelings, it was very I should step back a minute and say that when I first saw the craft the first time, it was walking into the hangar, and my impression was, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. This is just a secret military aircraft we're working on, and that's the end of that. It was actually the second time when I saw the craft, when I got to enter it and look over it, and I finally realized what was going on, that this is an alien craft. And of course this was after I read the briefings, and that was a totally different feeling. That was not a feeling of excitement. It was almost an ominous feeling, that a feeling as if you shouldn't even be there. It's very difficult to describe.
How did it look like?
It looked like, if anyone's familiar with Billy Meyer's sightings, very astonishingly similar to that craft. It was a very sleek, thin-looking, flying saucer-shaped craft. Kind of hard to describe without drawing it, but kind of a typical flying saucer shape.
Did you see just one type or different types?
There were 9 total. I only got to essentially work, back engineer, or analyze one of the craft, but there was a separate hangar for each of the crafts, and each one was essentially different in its visual appearance.
Did anybody tell you where the U.S. Navy intelligence got the craft from?
No, not at all. That's a lot of people have speculated about it, that they were either shot down or they crashed, but the craft seemed undamaged, so I doubt either of those would be correct.
Can you describe the inside of an alien craft?
It's very plain. It's all one solid color, a grayish pewter color, the same color as the outside of the craft. There are no sharp corners anywhere. Every device in the craft, the seat, the amplifier housings, everything has a rounded corner on it, almost as if it was all fashioned out of wax and then slightly melted, so everything curved, even where the ceiling meets the floor on the end. Everything has a curve to it. Very, very plain, very wide open, very impractical use of space. And there are 3 levels. The lower level houses the amplifiers themselves that swing, the 3 of them. The center level is where you enter the craft, where the seats and the amplifiers are, and the top level is a small area, and I did not have access to that, so I don't know what's up there.
Do you think they're alien craft or U.S. constructed?
Absolutely alien craft, there's no question about it.
Why?
Well, first of all, the scope of the project was to back engineer it. If they were United States craft, we wouldn't be going backward trying to find out how they were built if we had built them. Second of all, the size of the equipment inside, the size of the seats, the materials that were in use, completely alien to us, pardon the pun, and the fuel, element 115, essentially non-existent. All these factors together, and of course the briefing information stating that they were alien craft.
Could anybody tell you how the propulsion functioned?
Well, that was part of my job, was to back engineer that and find out exactly how that operated. And they had made some progress, but I really don't know how long the craft was there being analyzed, if it was 1 year or 10 years before I got there, but it seems like only a modest amount of progress had been made. The propulsion system is really an amazing setup. There's 2 parts, there's gravity amplifiers and the reactor that provides the power. The reactor itself is a total annihilation reactor fueled by antimatter. Total annihilation is essentially the most efficient nuclear reaction that takes place of the three, fission, fusion, and annihilation. It uses a super heavy element, element 115, as it would appear on the periodic chart. None has yet been synthesized on Earth. It's my opinion that this occurs naturally in certain star systems. This element is bombarded in an extremely small accelerator. The element under bombardment undergoes spontaneous fission and produces antimatter particles. These are interacted with a gaseous matter target, and by means of a 100% efficient thermoelectric device is converted into electricity. Now, 100% efficient any electric device is essentially impossible. The first law of thermodynamics says that's basically impossible. There has to be waste heat and things of that sort, but there's none detected in this system. It's another amazing form of technology. This tremendous amount of power the system generates operates the amplifiers, and also as a byproduct of the 115 undergoing this bombardment, it produces a very interesting phenomena, a gravity A wave, as it's known to be called. This gravity A wave it travels in almost the same way microwaves travel. This is essentially applied to the gravity amplifiers, and by means of the electric current also provided by the reactor, it's amplified and focused. The amplified signal is shifted slightly out of phase, and by virtue of that they can repel or attract a gravitational body. The craft can take off on one gravity amplifier. There are three in this particular craft. When it's using just one amplifier, essentially pushing away from the Earth, it's known as Omicron configuration. For space travel, the craft will rotate up on its side, face the three gravity amplifiers at the target. They'll focus down on a single point some tremendous distance away, and the amplifier and the associated and the associated reactor will be run up to full power, and they essentially pull the fabric of space, distort space and time toward the craft, so they can traverse a tremendous amount of distance in virtually no time at all. They're not traveling in a linear fashion. They're essentially bending space, and space, the fabric of space essentially, and gravity and time are all interlaced. When you start distorting gravity, you distort time and space along with it. And these aren't theories. We've known these for a while. We just have no way of controlling them. But apparently, the civilization has found out how.
Did you people manage to fly one?
They've done several test flights in it, not out of the atmosphere. These are short, controlled, low-altitude flights. Essentially, they have a prized possession here, so they're not going to risk taking this to a point where they could potentially lose it, as at the gravitational pull of the Earth, or going too high. But I witnessed several tests outside the compound, and also one, probably about 100 feet away from the craft.
How did the craft behave in the flight?
Very, very quietly. It lifted off. It made a slight hissing sound, a slight blue glow from the bottom, probably due to the extreme voltage that's present on the craft. After a short time, that disappeared as it rose and just gently glided, and later sat down. It was very uneventful, but almost totally silent.
Can you please describe the briefing documents and the information contained in it?
There were an extensive amount, 120 some odd briefing documents, all of them very short, and essentially what they were doing was just giving me an overview of the other aspects of the research being done on the craft, and the bulk of the information, all the technical information, was specifically dealing with the power and propulsion system, which is what I was supposed to be working on. But there were documents basically stating that these were aliens that possessed the craft. There were some autopsy reports that, not very in-depth, they had no reason to give me in-depth reports on that, but they did have pictures and, well, 2 pictures actually, of the alien carcass with the chest cut open and a single organ removed, and the organ itself was sectioned. It seemed to, from my non-medical viewpoint, it seemed that this one organ performed many functions instead of one. There were documents on metallurgical work being done on the craft, and really every aspect that separate groups were working on. And I'm sure they got a briefing on what my group was working on, a very abbreviated one, as I did on theirs.
And this will say where the aliens come from.
Yeah, it did mention the Zeta Reticuli system, and how that information was extracted from the craft, I don't know. Maybe there were star charts or something along those lines.
Did they contain any information about the history of mankind, the alien involvement in the history of mankind?
Not really. Nothing that said, well, this is the way things were. There was mention of alien intervention in the past. I mean, extremely long ago. Something along the lines of millions of years ago. From the information that I looked at, it seemed that, and there again, these are briefing documents, so I can't myself ascertain whether or not these are true. I can only assume it because the briefing documents I read that pertain to the propulsion system were true because I dealt with that. But they did make reference to contact with the Earth over 10,000 years ago, also with genetic alterations that ended in a simian being, and all kinds of claims.
Did you ever meet an alien or some alien body?
Other than in pictures, no. I've mentioned several times that I'd walk through an area and looked in a small window and saw something small there, but I really can't say that was an alien body. A lot of people jump on that and say, yeah, you must have seen an alien, but there's just as much chance that they were trying to figure out the size difference and how the seats fit a body, and they had made up a small mannequin or something. I didn't see anything moving around alive. So I always say no, I have never seen a living alien.
Why do you think you were chosen for the job?
That's very difficult to say. I really don't know. I'm certainly not the most qualified as far as physics goes. So I really don't know. I approach things at a very different viewpoint. They might have been frustrated after a long time of walking down the same path and not getting anywhere, and they wanted someone essentially to come out of left field and approach it from a different angle with a different viewpoint, and I'm kind of known for that.
Why did you went public with the information?
When?
Why?
Why? That's, again, a complex question. It's not just one reason. There's several, stemming from many things. Harassment, to protect myself, the fact that this information being contained is also unfair, but there are many, many reasons.
After you went public, did they try to silence you in any way?
Oh, in every way. Yes, I was shot at while getting on the freeway here in Las Vegas. Friends were harassed and taken out of work that knew me. Many things happened.
Well, he was upset about the security at the base. It was an oppressive place to work. He was upset that they didn't have better scientists and a more open kind of research that would allow them to finally get to the bottom of how this alien technology worked. He thought that information should be shared with the entire world in order to benefit the entire world. At the same time, he was going through some personal crises that led to him sharing some of this information with some people that he knew. Once he got caught, he was worried about his safety, They put guns to his head. They told him he was in a heck of a lot of trouble. And I think the reason he was willing to talk to me, at least what he told me in the beginning, was he was trying to save his hide. He figured by going public that they wouldn't dare do something to him. It seems to me that for several months there, after he was talking to me, there were serious attempts to intimidate him, to keep him quiet, but he had the courage to pursue it. And I think he made the right decision, because I'm not sure that he would be alive today if he had not spoken to the television camera. Michael, I was in Las Vegas television for 10 years. I worked stories about political corruption, organized crime, illegal drugs. I've never done a story anything like this. When I first met Bob Lazar, I was only tangentially interested in the UFO material. I had done some talk shows about it. I knew the public was interested in it, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to do the story about Area 51. Stories about Area 51 and possible alien technology there had been floating around for as long as I had lived in Las Vegas, but there had never been any thorough investigation, primarily because no one who had inside knowledge of the program had ever been willing to talk about it publicly until Bob Lazar. When I met Bob, I had a meeting with him and my news director. We asked him a lot of questions. We asked him the basics of his story. It obviously has a fantastic story, but we decided to go forward with it because Bob himself seemed so credible. It became very difficult very soon, however, because trying to verify Bob's background proved extremely difficult. It is still proving extremely difficult. For example, we quickly found out that the schools that he said he went to had no records that he was ever there. His former employers, where he said he worked, had no records that he'd ever been there. In particular, Los Alamos National Lab was the linchpin of his credibility. We thought if we could prove that he worked at Los Alamos, as he said, it must have meant that he went to school somewhere, because they don't just hire people off the street. And if he worked at Los Alamos National Lab on classified material, it made sense that he could have been hired to work at other classified programs, such as S4, Papoose Lake. However, the people at Los Alamos Lab said they had no records that he'd ever been there. They stalled on our requests for information. They wouldn't return phone calls. They wouldn't answer letters. It was as if they didn't want us to have the answers. Well, eventually we came up with a lot of indications that Bob did work there. We found, for example, the newspaper from Los Alamos that lists him as being a physicist from the lab. We found the laboratory telephone book that lists him as being an employee at the lab. We have talked to other people at the lab who worked with him, who tell us that Bob did work on classified projects, that he was a physicist, that he was there. Just this week, almost 4 years after we first started making our inquiries at Los Alamos, we finally got someone from the lab to say, yes, Bob Lazar was here. Yes, he worked at the Mason facility. Yes, that facility did some classified work. It's taken a long time, but now we know that Bob was there. We know he had a security clearance, but we still know that there are a lot of the records that we're searching have not been produced for us. We don't know why.
What convinced you most that Bob Lazar told you the truth?
Well, I'm not 100% sure about everything that he says, because as journalists, we have to be somewhat skeptical. But a couple of things stand out in my mind. Number one is that Bob has always told the same story. The story that he told me on the first day that I met him about his experiences at S4 is the same story he tells today. And most importantly, when Bob got into some legal trouble, which in the eyes of many people means that he's completely discredited. When he got into his legal trouble, he told the court system the exact same thing. Now, the courts, the interesting thing is, they're trying to verify his background, the probation department, and they said, we can't verify his background, therefore he should go to prison. Well, my response to it is, welcome to the club. You can't get any information on his background. Bob was facing up to 60 years in prison if he did not tell the truth about his background, and the story that he told to the court is the same story that he told to me on the first day and the same story that he's telling today.
After you interviewed Lazar on TV, did you come in contact with other witnesses from Area 51?
Several witnesses, more than a dozen now in total, have come forward with bits and pieces of information that confirm at least parts of what Bob said. No one has come forward with the kind of broad knowledge that he claimed, but what I have learned from these other people tends to confirm that what Bob is saying is true. The problem is that none of them have been willing to talk publicly. They will give me bits and pieces of information privately, but I'm restricted from using their names. And there's some very good reasons for that. There's been an obvious attempt to intimidate these witnesses into keeping their mouths shut. The 3 examples come to mind. One is a former electrical engineer who worked in the television business, who moved from Las Vegas and whom I worked with, moved to another city. He had told me by phone that he had seen a disc under a tarp in a building at Groom Lake. Well, I tried to arrange to do an interview, long-distance interview, with a camera crew in the city where he lives. He agreed to do it as long as I blacked out his face. He comes out the morning after he makes the agreement to give me this interview. There's a car sitting in front of his house, 2 men in suits speaking into a radio. He's not giving it much of a thought, but they followed him to work. When he gets out of work, they followed him home. No interview. He was scared. There's a woman who works in the court system here in Las Vegas in a very responsible position, who formerly worked for a major defense contractor here in Nevada. She had sat in on meetings where she said the discussion between her employer and military officials was about wreckage from Roswell, which had been taken to Area 51, alien wreckage. She had agreed to give me this information in a private meeting that we were going to have, but the day that the meeting was supposed to happen, she didn't show up, and I found out later she'd been visited by her former employers, and they had told her she's still under oath, she could be prosecuted, but what's more, her employers hinted that harm could come to this woman or her family if she talked to me. They said, "We know you do a lot of traveling. We'd hate for accidents to happen to you or your family." So she will still not talk to me now 3 years later. There was a third example, this man who performed the tax returns of persons who worked at Area 51. He had called me up on the phone at the TV station and told me he would meet and give me this information. The next day, he's visited by 2 men who say that they're from the Secret Service, and they wanted to ask him about his tax returns, but he said that it was his definite impression they didn't care about his tax returns, they just wanted him to shut up and not talk about Area 51. So there are a lot of people like that who have information, who could confirm Bob Lazar's story if they had the courage to come forward. I can't really blame them for not coming forward because our government or elements of our government or representatives of our government seem to use intimidation and fear tactics to keep these people quiet.
The only evidence that we got is we were able to steal or otherwise obtain a piece of the fuel that powers the saucers. It was element 115. It's a stable element, and we did several experiments with this. We also videotaped these experiments. The experiment was to prove the high gravitational attraction, the heaviness of the element, and other things. We proved it to ourselves. Unfortunately, whoever is in charge of the cover-up stole it back. The other thing was that on March 21st, 1989, he asked me if I wanted to view one of the test flights. This was on a Tuesday, and I said, well, sure, but how are we going to see one? And he said, there's going to be a test flight tomorrow night just at sunset. And I know a place where we can sneak in, still be on public land, and watch it. I said, great. So I said, why at sunset? And he said, well, statistically, up in that area, there's the least traffic around then. So I drove with Bob and the real estate appraiser, Gene Huff, and myself, and we drove up there, got there just a little bit before sunset. I took my Celestron telescope, we took a video camera, got out of the car, and within maybe 10 or 15 minutes, this disc comes up from behind the mountains and starts doing all these fantastic maneuvers. It was a light, a very bright light, and you couldn't see the disc form. But I had my Celestron scope with me, which is 8 inches, extremely powerful, and after a few minutes I was able to get it right in the finder of the Celestron telescope, and I saw for myself it was a disc. There was no question in my mind, and I just watched it go down behind the mountains.
We had heard about this location, and actually the information ultimately had come from John Lear, we found out. We heard about the 29.5 mile marker, the famous mailbox area. So we went up there. Our first trip was the first Saturday in January of 1990. And we arrived there about 10:30 at night, and while we didn't see anything on that trip, it was a Saturday night, we found out that the active nights are Monday through Friday, and the weekends are usually shut down. But what we did find out, there were several other vehicles up there, 3 motorhomes and a couple of passenger cars, and talking with those people, we found out that they, having had gone out there on numerous other occasions, had seen plenty. So we were determined that, and we had understood from the beginning, that this was going to be something where on one night you would see nothing, and on the next night all hell might break loose. So we were prepared for the long haul. We were going to continue going out there until we should eventually see something. So then upon returning back home, I discovered that I could tune in the Billy Goodman happening out of Las Vegas in Santa Monica. I could receive it. So I started listening, and almost the first night, Bob Lazar was being interviewed by Billy Goodman. And I listened intensely. And I discovered from Lazar's interview that the best nights to go out there are Wednesday nights, that they pull out most of the stops on Wednesday nights. Now the reason for that was explained, that when they were preparing this facility and the operation, they did a study on Highway 375, the public highway through the action zone, Tickaboo Valley. And they determined from their study that there was the least traffic on Wednesday nights on Highway 375. So that's why Wednesday nights were chosen for most of the action. Although we, in having made numerous other trips, determined that almost any weeknight is effective, Monday through Friday. But Wednesdays always seems to be the most prolific, probably for that reason. But then, of course, we wondered that since we were going out there on a Wednesday night, maybe that would perturb the formula, and then, of course, it would shift to some other weeknight. Who knows? So, but still, nevertheless, it seems that Wednesday nights still continue to dominate with the greatest amount of activity out there. So, our next trip was Wednesday, February 28th. Now, on our first trip, I had gathered together about 7 or 8 friends, and we caravanned out there and saw nothing, of course. Then I started organizing the same group of friends to make this second trip. But this time it was in the middle of the week. And lo and behold, when it came close to the time to depart, we found out that none of our friends could make it. Work weeknight. So Pearl says, "Boy, I don't think I want to go out there all alone." I said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous, dear." I said, "We obtained this information off radio, KVEG, clear in Santa Monica, being broadcast from Las Vegas." I said, "There are people all over the western states that are hearing this. We have a tangential interest in UFOs at this point. Think of the people that have a voracious interest in the subject. You're going to have people going out there from all over, and I'm sure the word is spreading to other countries of the world. You'll probably have people out there from Australia and Europe and all over the map, to say nothing of the people from Las Vegas close by." I said, "There could be scores, even hundreds of people out there. Don't be ridiculous." So we went out there. We were all alone. I was actually outraged. Well, anyway, we got out there, and I believe we arrived around 3:30 at the mailbox, and we decided to go to the Little Alien for dinner. And we came back and got to the mailbox by about 5:30. It was dusk and beginning to get dark. Wednesday, February 28, 1990. And I got out my lawn chair, and suddenly at 7:30, the first craft came up, and I was astounded. I leaped out of my lawn chair, had a camera around my neck, my 35 millimeter point and shoot camera, Nikon Action Touch, and I took a couple of shots. And then we actually, about every 45 minutes, a craft would come up one at a time. We saw 6 craft that night, each one in succession. And it was craft number about 2 or 3 that was the most dramatic. That is, it was the one that came the closest, and I took a photograph of it. What we actually saw, Michael, was a craft that was ellipsoidal in shape. It was pulsating brightly, and while we couldn't see the outline of the craft, the strict outline, we saw this very brightly pulsating ellipsoid. And when I snapped some shots, apparently the camera, with its low-end optics, that is, we didn't have a huge magnifying lens, so it didn't bring the craft in so close that it would have appeared as a giant blur of light. So, plus, it must have caught the craft in a trough of its pulse, because the photograph captured the craft beautifully. That is the outline of it. So it was just a fluke of being at the right place at the right time and having the right optical setup.
Going to Groom Lake, Area 51. What happened to you on this night?
Well, on that night, February the 21st, 1990, I accompanied a crew from Nippon Television Network to witness a test flight of an object over Groom Lake, which is known as Area 51. We arrived at the site around just after sundown because, according to the information given to us on that same day when we visited Mr. Lazar at his residence, he said that if you go there after sundown and stand near the mailbox area of Highway 375, looking south towards Groom Mountains and also to the Jumble Hills, you will see test flight of these objects. And lo and behold, when we arrived at the scene, exactly around 6:45 or so, we started seeing, we suddenly started seeing an orangish, yellowish light suddenly appear on top of Jumbled Hills, making a motion to the right for about 15 seconds or so. Next, exactly at 8:15 p.m., we had another sighting of the same object that suddenly appeared on top of Jumbled Hills, came up above the hills, and made its appearance, went slightly to the right side, and at that juncture in time, it made a sudden descension and a back turn, which I estimated to be possibly about 5,000 feet sudden descension, a back turn descension. And I had never seen anything like that in my life ever. And it is definitely a test flight of highly unusual object, a demonstration of technology, a propulsion system so exotic right now. We don't know what it was, but it was being tested at that very night.
Well, I've become probably the expert on Area 51 in the United States since February 26th of 1991, which was my first trip out to Area 51. On that trip, I got as close as I have ever gotten to a flying saucer. It was the first time I'd ever seen a UFO, actually. I was traveling in a car with my friend down the road, and a very large object flashed over the car and then began to float probably about a mile away from us in the open desert. We got out of the car, ran towards the object, and got within a few hundred yards of a large disc-shaped object about 40 feet in diameter that looked like a saucer with a teacup on the top of it. It glowed a brilliant reddish-orange color and then glowed a real bright yellow color. On one occasion, we thought that the object was actually going to explode because it glowed so brilliantly. It would shoot up to about 200 feet in the air, make a falling leaf motion back and forth, and then go back down onto the ground. This object was amazing. I was so excited because I'd never seen anything before like this ever in my life. We got our faces burned. We had a mild case of radiation poisoning after that. We had fevers for 3 or 4 days of about 102, 103 degrees, which we felt was radiation poisoning. And since then, I've been out to the Area 51 area probably some 40, 50 times or so, and have taken quite literally hundreds of people out there.
We had gone to a place called Rachel, where there was supposed to have been this gathering of people, one of which I had heard on the radio in Los Angeles, and that's what seems so intriguing. We passed this large group of people in the middle of nowhere out in the desert. There was a tour bus and probably 24 cars or so, just in the middle of nowhere, total darkness. We went on by them and went into Rachel. We stayed there for about 45 minutes, just listening to the conversation going on, and decided that the place to be was probably the group of people that we had passed about 15 miles back. We went there and sat and began watching like it seemed everyone else was doing, and then we had the first actual sighting.
I looked up in the sky, and I thought there was a really bright star up there, and I said, John, is that star kind of moving? And right about the same time I saw that, and he goes, yeah, I think it is. And right about that time, it just like a falling star dropped out of the sky, and just came straight down to right above a mountain range that was about 5 miles away from us, and just stopped there and hovered, and then moved around the mountains a little bit, making various maneuvers that no aircraft could possibly make. And then it just stopped, and then it lowered itself down below the mountains out of view. And that was the first of many weird things we saw that night. And the people on the bus were there at that time. They all applauded like, oh, there was a sighting. And it was getting late. It was about it was not even quite midnight then. And so they all kind of applauded and said, well, that's there. And they all got in the bus and left.
Did you recognize any details?
Not at that time.
Not at that time.
That particular sighting was completely on the other side of this large valley that was at least 15, 20 miles across, at the point at where we saw it come down and float across the valley.
Yeah.
The most dramatic thing that happened that evening was after a large number of the people had left, including the tour bus. It was down to 3 cars, and we were sitting in the middle of these 3 cars and had been watching a light maneuvering kind of wildly out on the other side of the valley, and were just intrigued as it came straight toward us, as if it was singling out Jeff and I in particular from this immense distance away in a straight line. And there was a car on the other side, on our right side, that had the dome light on, and they were making sandwiches. They didn't see this happen.
Yeah,
there was a car
just totally
on the left side.
What was going on?
They didn't see it happen. They had the seats down, and I think they were making out.
Yeah.
And we were absolutely stunned. I felt absolutely awestruck as this light that we had been watching came straight toward us. In just an instant, it crossed that long valley, and Jeff became actually frightened
because we're sitting in a pickup truck, and I'm looking right up like this, and it stopped and hovered practically right over us, and then it turned on a light from the edge of the craft, and when it came over us and stopped and hovered, the light seemed to be on the top of it, and it revealed like a silhouette of a disc, and you could clearly say it was a disc-shaped craft, and it made no noise whatsoever, just hovering above us, probably maybe under 100 feet in altitude above us. Yeah. And it stayed there and hovered for a few seconds more, and that's when I was starting to get worried, that something else is going to happen now that they've checked us out. Maybe they're going to land, or I didn't know what was going to go on, so I got pretty scared at that point. And right about the same time I got scared, the thing just zoomed back over the mountains, and you're talking about like, what was it, 10, 10 miles, and within a split second it was over this mountain range, and then it stopped, and then just lowered itself on the other side of the range, out of sight.
We have to understand one fact, that Area 51 has 3 tiers of security system. The outer perimeter security, the inner security, and also the regular military security, plus automated security system. We're talking about outer perimeter security. Area 51 is using semi-private security firms such as Wackenhut Corporation. We call them Wackenhut SS because basically it's the way they operate. Wackenhut SS, of course, means Wackenhut Special Securities Corporation, of course, and they are assigned to guard the outer perimeters of Area 51. And they, because of the status of being a semi-private status, they don't wear any insignias of any kind. They wear military camouflage uniforms and carry machine guns and so on. They ride unmarked four-wheel blazer type vehicles, and they harass citizens who even dare to drive on any of these dirt roads south of the Highway 375. We have every right to be driving on these public lands as long as we don't cross the warning sign area. We were harassed by dangerously maneuvering helicopter over public land on May 16th, 1991. A group of us, altogether 18 of us, were in a 7-car caravan just coming back on Groom Road after taking pictures of the warning sign area. We were coming back to Highway 375. But suddenly, we heard a thunderous sound overhead, as if a railroad was passing over our cars. When we looked up, there was this military helicopter that appeared and came about 5 to 8 feet above our cars on purpose, harassing us, intimidating us, and for the next 15 to 16 minutes, we were trying to get away from this helicopter. We were frantically trying to drive and go away from this area, and we were buzzed by this helicopter continuously for 15 minutes. In one occasion, this helicopter circled around as we were driving and came front of our cars at almost low level and just scared us and continued this illegal maneuvering, endangering our lives.
Where is it? Where is it? There it is.
Jeez, how can you see anything with it?
It went behind the mountain. There it is. There it is.
Okay. That's flying over there. Huh? Yeah, it's test flying. It's going to continue for the next stop.
Wait, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's flying over there.
Take a look at here. Yeah, take a look at it. It's a light. See, when I see it darker off.
It's hovering over there.
I had to put the gain on just to see it. Boy, my battery.
Yeah, right.
Fortunately, this isn't doing me any good.
Yeah. I think so.
Who's that, Gary? Tell him to shut up.
I can't look when he's talking. It's so damn funny. You seen it doing zigzags before?
Yeah, it's flying all right.
The UFO, which yet was filmed by the Japanese television crew that night, was analyzed by Nippon Television with the help of latest state-of-the-art computers. The result? It's definitely no conventional aircraft.
日立取材班が撮影した飛行物体もコンピューター解析してみた。エリア51に現れた例の光る物体は、その明るさの度合いを細かな色に分けて表示するとこのような姿になる。一方その後同じ場所から撮った車のヘッドライトは明るさがこのような構成になり、比較することができる。これはその光の明るさが時間によってどのように変化するかを大きさで示したもので、ヘッドライトの場合かなり変化するものということがわかる。一方エリア51で撮られた光る物体は常に同じ大きさで明るさが変わらない。やはり普通の物体とは全く違うものなのではないだろうか。
But also around Las Vegas, unknown flying objects are regularly observed.
I took my wife to work one morning, and on the way back, I was looking out the windows I usually do, and I carry my camera with me quite often. And I saw this anomaly, this UFO in the sky, and so I stopped my car and pulled out and took some footage of it, which is what you're looking at now, I guess. That's about it. And it came on 2 different mornings, as a matter of fact. So on 2 different mornings, I took pictures of it. This was in 1991, and it was, actually we've seen a lot of things around Las Vegas here. It's a great area to spot UFO objects. I've seen cigar-shaped UFOs, I've seen the regular discs, and I've seen anomalies of all styles and types around here. I've spent many a night, all night, up looking for UFO things in the sky.
One morning when I woke up, I was drawing the curtains of the window, and it was a cloudy day, but clear. And 2, they looked just like bowler hats, dull grey, no windows, no wheels, no nothing, just looked like a bowler hat, metal, definitely metal. There was 2 of them. One was flying in a steady fashion, and the other one, it looked like the pilot was drunk because it was just flying this way. And they went down behind some apartments, which were only about 100 yards away from me. That I was impressed with. I told my wife about it, and she gave me a strange look. And 2 weeks to the day, she was at the same window, saw the same things, and called me at work. And she was gibbering away, and I said, yeah. And from then on, we'd seen quite a few. I spent a lot of time out in the desert with my camera, and I got rather obsessed with it for a while. But as you'll see in some of the other footage of what I've got, it's quite interesting, and it's definitely unexplained. It happened when I was at work. It was a Sunday, and it was close to 7 o'clock. And for some reason, I just took my camera to the parking garage roof and started filming what you see here, which are 2 remote type objects sort of dancing around. And in a little while you'll see another craft come along underneath. It's a little larger and it's very stable, and this guy's steadily heading north. These 2 which are dancing around seem to interact with it, and then it goes on its way. A few minutes later, another craft comes along the base part of the mountain, and In between that, an aeroplane going in to land at McCarran Airport goes past, so you get a good idea of the size and the distance. And then these two objects again interact with this large craft, and as you'll see towards the end of the tape here, I follow it round to see where the craft went to, and it's totally out of sight, it's vanished.
Do you recognize more details when visible?
No, not really, no. It was just close to dusk. They were just lights in the sky. It's slightly delta-shaped, I think the objects are. That's how they appear anyway, when I zoom in.
Obviously, the Lazar UFOs were just the tip of an iceberg. A black world, as fantastic as a fairy tale country or a faraway planet. Yet, committed researchers try to trace down the last mystery of these super-secret test flights.
By looking at the maps and by discussing things not only with the sheriffs, but also with friends of mine, I found a mountaintop in which you can actually climb to the top of the mountain, and it's about an hour and a half hike or so. It's about 7 miles to the top of a mountain which we call Morton's Mountain, since I was the one that first found it. Climb up to the top of the mountain, and this is where you get this spectacular view of virtually the entire base. You can see this particular video was taken at night, so because of the fact that we were very afraid of being caught out there still during the day, because we weren't really sure whether or not we were over the military's border or not. At about 6 a.m. every morning, they were sending helicopters out, literally chasing us around if we were anywhere near their border. And the evening times, they would send out the security vehicles, the Bronco security vehicles, who would do everything from take down our license plate numbers to actually go through our cars to looking for us in the desert, thinking that we were actually stepping across their border. This videotape comes from our efforts, literally risking our lives at that time to be able to get a good view inside this, probably one of the most top secret facilities the United States has above ground. Specifically what you're looking at is you're looking at Area 51 at night, taken at around dusk. You're also looking at another section of the video which was work that looks like was going on the runway. Now, for some reason, the military was carrying out some kind of either construction operation at night. Now, there seems to be a huge halogen lamp that's illuminating part of the field, in which you'll see smaller lights, which are trucks and jeeps basically coming and going from this light. You'll see on the film what we thought originally was a ship actually coming on and testing and moving around on the floor of the valley. It didn't really move that much at night, so that's why we concluded that it must have been some sort of halogen work lamp. You'll see for the first time the object which is called Old Faithful. Now, Old Faithful is called that because something appears in the sky over Area 51 at 4:50 a.m. virtually every Thursday morning. Now, many times this object is preceded by what in California have become known as skyquakes. There is a very large object which we've witnessed out there between 700 and 800 feet long, and this object literally comes in from space, traveling anywhere between Mach 10 and about Mach 18, flies over Catalina Island, over Southern California, and then lands at Area 51. This particular object that you're seeing, we theorize, is what's known as Project Senior Prom, which is underneath the Project Aurora banner, and that this object is in fact an unmanned 132 nuclear weapon carrying nuke platform that in essence orbits the planet to be able to rain down nuclear bombs on virtually any country at the push of a button. This object, as it's landing, you'll see it appear in the sky, very dramatic footage of the first time anything has ever been shot actually physically landing at 51. The object appears at exactly 4:50 a.m., comes down in a conventional flight pattern. Now, sometimes this object will shake back and forth violently, displaying all the characteristics of a, quote, conventional UFO, unquote. And on this particular occasion, it comes all the way down in a very straight line. You'll see a field around the outside of the object, and when it comes down between two safety lights, you'll see it actually physically land, and then when it comes past a second set of safety lights, the field around the ship actually blinks off, and then you can see that it is some sort of unusual dart-shaped aircraft, some sort of experimental aircraft, because it does have wheels on it, and it does appear to have a fuselage that comes up in a point with a light at the top and at the bottom, and then comes back at the bottom. So it is a very unusual ship, and this particular ship was in fact preceded by one of the famous Southern California skyquakes.
Rachel is a small desert nest at the Highway 375, which passes the Black World. Its inhabitants are mainly workers of the test site. Rachel's main attraction is the Little Ale Inn, the local grill and beer bar owned by Pat and Joe Dravis, which became the main information exchange for Area 51 enthusiasts from all over the world. It not only exhibits UFO memorabilia, it also houses a library and a large collection of newspaper articles about secret government experiments, documenting that the greatest secret of our time actually is no secret anymore. Aviation expert and writer Jim Goodall was one of the first to lift the veil of silence.
I am a published author. I've written for 3 different publications. I have a number of articles on black programs and secret projects for Jane's Defense Weekly, for Interavia, for Aviation Week Space Technology. I have 3 books right here that I have authored just on the F-117 alone. That is where I spend all my spare time, is digging. I've had my neighbors questioned, I've had my mail opened, I've had my phones tapped. I was called up for Desert Shield. I'm in the Air National Guard. They held up my clearance at the Pentagon. They didn't deny my clearance, they held it up because I asked too many questions of my government. And my response was, that is my job. As an American taxpayer, it's my job to question my government whenever I feel it fit, and I do. And I make a lot of enemies, and I'm referred to as that SOB from Minnesota. I have quite a reputation in the Pentagon for being able to dig up information when no one else can. What's going on in Area 51 today, based on information from first-person interviews I've made over the last 6 or 7 years, there are at least 8 black programs flying out of Groom Lake, out of Area 51. That does not count the B-2 bomber, because it's not a black program. It does not count the F-117, which is virtually a white program today. There are at least 2 very, very high-speed aircraft that have been reported since 1982 is when we've heard the first reports of them. One of them is a small aircraft. It goes approximately Mach 4 to Mach 6. There's an aircraft that has been tracked out of the Bay Area TRACON in Oakland, California by the Federal Aviation Administration Center at least 8 times since 1986, flying in excess of 10,000 miles an hour going through controlled airspace. And a very, very large aircraft at that. Besides the 2 high-speed aircraft, there is a stealth or low observable electronic warfare aircraft. It's been referred to as Excalibur. There is an aircraft that is designed to fly very, very high, but very, very slow and very, very quiet. There's been some rumblings or reports as a flying triangle, much like the canceled McDonnell Douglas General Dynamics A-12. That was going to be an attack aircraft. Just recently, out of Lancaster, California, taken off from Palmdale, which is Air Force Plant 42, and that's where the B-1 was built. The B-2 bomber is being built there. The F-117 is being serviced there, and the U-2 operations. There has been at least 3 sightings of triangular-shaped aircraft being launched out of that area. They made no noise, and just the people just happened to look up and see these things leaving the area at relatively low altitude. But again, no noise.
Are there any unconventional technologies, propulsion technologies involved?
Yes, I have had the opportunity over the years to interview, again, people who have worked at the test site at Groom Lake. One gentleman spent 12 of his 30 years in black programs at Groom Lake. When I asked him, I said, first of all, I said, do you believe in UFOs? And he looked at me with a straight face in one-on-one, and he said, absolutely, positively, they do exist. I said, can you expand upon that? And he said, no, I can't. About a year later, we were talking about, again, activities at Groom Lake. And I asked him, I said, you know, can you really tell me what's happening out there? And he said, well, there's a lot of things that are going on there that I won't be able to tell you until the year 2025. But we have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious. Another individual who was an NCO, an E9, which is the highest grade you can get as an enlisted man. He's a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force. Was a safety specialist. He had 3 different tours of duty at Groom Lake on various programs. Now, he had no connection with my friend who worked on the other black programs. We were talking, I interviewed him at Nellis in 1985, 86 time frame. And I said, what's out there? And again, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, we have things out there that are literally out of this world. I said, explain. He said, I can't. But trust me, see, we have things that are better than Star Trek, better than anything you can see in the movies. He said, are the airplanes? He said, I can't comment.
There's 4 levels in Site 4, excluding the top level, the surface, which is basically a hangars with the satellite. There's really not too much to it, but the levels are all operated. There's the first and second levels are all elevator where they keep the flying disc, ships, whatever you call it. They bring it to the surface. Right when I was there, they were trying to operate the disc, but to my viewing, unsuccessfully. There's scientists there. I've personally witnessed high White House officials being there. Right now I'm basically kind of scared. I mean, I'm on the run. I don't know what everything holds for me. I just want to get this out in the open.
A security guard at level 2 of S4 in Area 51. And he described Area S4 as a facility occupying at least 4 levels. He was aware of 4. He worked on level 2. He had passed through level 1. He never saw level 3 or level 4 because no military people were allowed below those levels. Only people with very specific clearances could go to level 3 and level 4. He described level 2 in considerable detail to us, and he said level 2 consisted of 9 hangar bays, I guess you would call them, because they were the size, they would hold a small airplane. And there were circular disc-shaped craft in 7 of the 9 bays. He described the floor layout, he described the security posts, the guard positions, an area where bodies were stored in large glass cylinders. He described special equipment, he described the monitoring equipment, the security system to go down to levels 3 and 4. He said that they were never allowed down there. Only specially cleared people with very specific clearances, which included a plastic card with magnetic information in it, a handprint, and a right eye retina scan, and put their eye to a little camera. And if they passed, they could go down. If not, their instructions were to arrest them immediately and have somebody from above come down and get them.
This is a very vast complex. big place, huh? Big place. The elevators are right here. There's 4 elevators. 3 and 4 are extremely security. There are no sentries down at 3 or 4. And the levels of 3 and 4, I don't know what goes on down there. I heard something about an EBI or EB down there. I'm not too familiar with what it is, but as you get off the elevators, you get off, and this is level 2. You walk in, the bays are over here. They're all separated by like an automatic doors that open and close each bay. Walk down, there's 5 on each side. There's a hallway right there, and each of these bays have elevators. It'll bring them all the way to the top. It'll bring the whole floor all the way up with a hydraulic system. Now, as you walk down, there's a lot of machinery right here, which I have no recollection of what it does. I believe I've never been in that area. My job was to be a sentry for these 3 gates and up above in the level complex, and sometimes I would be walking down here escorting people. Now, over on this, there's a hallway down here that breaks off, which is there's a big computer system right here. I believe it's a computer system. I'm not going to say for sure. Right here is a level. There's 7 tubes. These tubes are about 2 feet in width. They're about 6 feet in height. They stand on end? They stand on end on end. Now, as you walk in and you look at these tubes, I'm just going to draw a picture of one. They're all exactly the same, and the creatures inside are completely identical. There's absolutely no way that I can see of identifying each and every one of them individually. Now there's an aluminum part right here. I don't know if it's covering the genitals of them or not, but the rest is filled with the solution. There's a couple tanks right here. I don't know if they're oxygen. I don't know what they hold. There's no identifying marks on them whatsoever. There's absolutely no air in the tanks. It's all solution. And the grays are just in here, right here. They're suspended, so I imagine they're being clamped somehow, some way to hold them in this completely, where their feet is completely off the ground and stuff like that. And under here, there's about a 1-foot pedestal of black iron steel, it's polished, but it looks like a black polished anodized iron. Now the things inside, resemble what everybody sees, and the only thing that's different about them, from what I see on all the pictures, is the eyes appear to be have deteriorated, or they look like prunes. They're like your fingers get pruned. They're all shriveled up, and you can't see no eye sockets, and there's no visible eyelids or anything like that. They have a grayish, a grayish pigmentation. It's not scaly or anything. It's like a pigmentation. There's no apparent hair on them. There's little holes, not really slits, but a little hole, maybe an ear cartilage. I don't know if you're hearing. The slits are really kind of small for the nose and the mouth. The bodies themselves are very, very thin. They appear not to have any breast or navel or anything like that. Not that I can see.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to sit and study them in full view for a while. I don't think I have heard talk there that I know their systems aren't like ours. But they're very thin and they look very, very frail.
What convinced you that Hennessy told you the truth?
We only have looking him in the eye and talking to him. We've analyzed his voice during the narration. Doesn't show any signs of stress. We've heard rumors of some details inside from others that has never been released or published. So unless they were on the inside circle and knew what was being held back, most people would never know the information that he gave us. Most of the information that he gave us checked with other information we already had, and it has checked since with other information that we have acquired since the time we interviewed him.
Mr. Morton, you came in contact with a sergeant who worked at Area 51.
Yes, I was on an American television program called Mysteries from Beyond the Other Dominion, and at the end of the program they gave my telephone number. This gentleman contacted me through that telephone number and related to me that he was in fact a master sergeant at Area 51 for over 12 years, and that everything that had to be taken in and out of the base or transported from one place to another on the facility had to go across his desk. Of course, the man had a very high-level top-secret clearance. He gave me his name, he gave me a military ID number which I was able to check, and his military ID did in fact check out that he had worked at Nellis Air Force Base and had then worked at the Area 51 facility. He told me a number of very interesting things about how the facility was laid out, how many levels the facility had, how it was connected to other facilities, and he asked me a number of questions about things that he didn't really know about, just stuff that he had seen going across his desk, and was curious about how certain things work. So there was an exchange of information between he and I. It is unfortunate that he seems to have disappeared. He seems to have moved with no forwarding address. His telephone number no longer works. I was in contact with him for quite a period of time, and then the man simply vanished.
Did he ever see alien spaceship or alien bodies?
On many occasions, he told me, Chip is what he called himself, that he had in fact transported disc-like saucers, what he considered to be alien spacecraft. And remember, he was not sure if they were alien or not. He never saw the actual paperwork on the craft. He was only responsible for transporting the objects from place to place. However, he did transport a number of very large 30 to 60 foot disc-shaped craft. He was responsible for transporting some bell-shaped objects. He said when they were at rest that they were a very dull gunmetal color. He did in fact witness on a number of occasions the tests of these craft, because they would have to cart them out to a certain place and then they take them off, and then the objects would then fly around. And he was asking me how something that looked so dead and so lifeless could then glow up the way that it did, and the metal on the ship would actually look as though it was alive. As far as the alien bodies were concerned, he told me that Area 51 had 5 underground levels to it. This was confirmed by 3 other sources that I had at the facility. He also claimed that there were not only living aliens on the base that he not only saw, because he was responsible for transporting them physically by jeep from one place to another, but also that he saw a number of alien bodies in very large tanks, that the tanks had a silver backing to them, that they had a silver strips across the middle and the bottom of the tank. They were filled with a blue liquid. He said that he personally saw 5 different tanks that had these alien bodies in them, the classic little gray bodies, the 3.5 to 4 feet tall, but that they also had 4 humanoid aliens that were had blondish and reddish hair. Very little was unusual about them that would demarcate them from actual humans, but he was told that these were actual alien bodies, supposedly, and this was his speculation now, but he said that they were supposedly from the Pleiades.
There are many underground alien facilities, and they're all over the place. There's also many underground U.S. facilities. In 1960, it became apparent to the military that if they were going to have any significant covert operations, they were going to have to be underground. The reason was people are extremely observant. They notice everything that's going on. And if there was going to be huge transportation of materials, men, equipment, all kinds of stuff, that it was going to be have to be underground. There was a major meeting with all the major contractors, the big contractors like Morrison Knudsen and those type of people. And the meeting included the highly specialized area of underground operations as far as drilling down there, how you move that kind of dirt. And they started then, basically in 1960, building all these underground facilities. Right now, they're just all over the United States. It's just incredible how many there are. There's a network of tunnels that connects Edwards Air Force Base with the Tehachapi Base, with Tonopah Test Range, Groom Lake, George Air Force Base, California City, China Lake. It's a tremendous network. I have varied and many people who have told me that they exist, that they have been down there. I have a friend that is a hydraulic engineer on one of the tunnel boring machines. It's 28 feet in diameter. He works at the Nevada test site where the tunnels go down almost 3,000 feet.
In addition to this, I have had a number of ex-military persons, engineers who've worked in the aerospace industry, for the aerospace companies out in the Antelope Valley, such as Lockheed, Northrop, Rockwell, who have related to me their knowledge of underground facilities. Not in all cases have they revealed what they knew about alien life forms or alien technology, but they said that these underground facilities exist without a doubt. Okay, that many aerospace companies have these facilities, that most of our Air Force bases, our naval bases, have these type of facilities underground, and that ultra-secret work goes on in secure underground facilities. Now, our difficulty has been in trying to come up with the evidence that these facilities are connected with the UFO phenomena. So we have had to approach this not only from the viewpoint of listening to testimony, but keeping some of these facilities under surveillance so that we can take cameras up there or any means that we can to record phenomena that seem to be emanating from or associated with these facilities. And that has been done. And people have reported seeing classic UFO phenomena around these facilities.
There are 4 aerospace covert facilities. This is what we call the aerospace connection in the Antelope Valley and also the San Joaquin Valley. Rockwell in the San Joaquin, Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, and Northrop in the Antelope Valleys. And these operations are extremely suspicious. They have a surface cover activity. They call themselves RCS testing sites. That stands for radar cross-section. And apparently their presumed purpose is to test various aeroform designs atop pylons with radar cross-section. And the disturbing part is that we have found out with incontrovertible proof that there are extensive underground facilities. And for example, Northrop, we have documented to have 42 levels underground. Now, if this is radar cross-section testing, which is above ground, why do they need 42 levels underground? Also, at the Lockheed facility out in Hellendale, we had an investigative reporter who saw a blueprint of the building plans for that facility that he wasn't supposed to see. It showed that they had an extensive underground facility 300 feet down. And when this reporter interviewed the person who was in charge of that facility, they had a nice, pleasant interview until at the end he told the director that he was aware of this extensive underground facility. And what could he tell him about that? And immediately the man's eyes grew wide and he said, "This interview is terminated." So it's very suspicious. And then, of course, we have other reports of people in the area who say that they have seen alien craft emanating from these facilities and terminating at these facilities. And other kinds of blue beams, strange lights in the sky, surveillance orbs the size of basketballs, medicine balls that survey the area and move in ways that we don't possess that kind of technology. In terms of the Northrop facility, which is also known as the Anthill, the construction, the underground facility was greatly enlarged in the early 80s. And what took place there was an enlargement, I understand, from 13 levels underground to 42 levels underground. And we have reports from construction workers who actually worked on the site, cement truck drivers. And at one point, Michael, cement trucks suddenly appeared on the scene 5 miles long, pouring concrete continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for weeks. And we figure at 3 yards of concrete, 9 yards of concrete per truck, close to 1 million yards of concrete must have been poured underground. Also, we understand from the construction workers that 3 silos were constructed there, 3 underground silos, and we were bringing out the fact that saucers have been seen to just come screaming out of the facility as if they had had some travel distance underground. And also craft would, like helicopters, would come into the facility and just disappear into the ground. So we knew from construction reports and from visual reports outside the facility that something very suspicious in the way of silos was going on. Norio and I put together the first investigative team to actually fly over these facilities and investigate them from the air with video cameras, still camera shots. It was very exciting. And on our first flyover of the Northrop facility, we spent about an hour in the air on that trip. It was historic. You can imagine that my heart practically jumped out of my mouth when we're flying over, and the pilot, unsolicited, says to me, "By the way, there are 3 silos down there." Now, I had learned from my inside contacts that 3 silos had been constructed there. And I was looking for those silos the minute we appeared over the facility. I was intensely looking for 3 silos, didn't see any, and suddenly the pilot says to me, "What I just told you." I was shocked. I tried to contain my excitement, and I pretended to be rather casual about it, and I said, "I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, but did you say silos down there?" And he says, "Oh yes." He says, "You see those white diamonds?" And sure enough, there were 3 white diamonds. Now this pilot, you must understand, we rented the plane in the Antelope Valley, so he flies that area continuously. He has students, he's a pilot instructor. So he's flying over there all the time. He told me that on numerous occasions when he's flown over these facilities, those white diamonds, the white covering, will be gone to reveal a deep, dark hole or silo into the ground.
Not only the black projects, but deep black projects program that is taking place about 10 miles south of Groom Lake. Groom Lake facility, of course, is a black projects program that is, technologically speaking, not in line with higher technology that is present 10 miles south, which is located on Papoose Lake facility. That is where a new type of propulsion system is being test flown, and again, it's my contention that some select U.S. pilots are being given instructions on maneuvering these objects. We have, from all types of reports and sources, this established this one fact, is that there is some type of pumpkin seed program. This is a nickname of a new type of propulsion system using pulse detonation system. And this is known as the pumpkin seed program because these objects they have almost like a diamond-shaped the form to this. Now, this is part of the Black Projects program. However, what I've been investigating is more than that. It's the Super Deep Black Projects program, which could possibly involve technology much higher than this type of pulse propulsion system, which could be antimatter or some type of anti-matter, as Mr. Lazar has been stating. The sources of our information are not only from researchers that have received a lot of infos through Aerospace Connection. We have been in touch with several persons that confirm that Black Project program is ongoing at Groom Lake facility, Papoose Lake facility, plus other facilities such as in California. The Northrop, McDonnell Douglas, and Lockheed, all of these facilities are conducting some type of testing of certain type of aeroforms that resemble almost a disc. And it's possible, very possible, that the technology behind this could be received from some intelligence, not necessarily us. In other words, we're talking about something possible transfer of technology.
After I had, of course, got out of the service, I worked for the government, as a test pilot on various different particular aircraft. While I did that particular activity, I was asked if I wouldn't mind working on some simulators, and I thought that was a good idea, good for my future, so I did. We were then reassigned. It was just not myself, it was several other fellows like myself, engineers, that were reassigned to certain companies here in the United States on the various different simulators that they were making for the various new aircrafts that they were building. For example, the F-89, F-94, and F-102, and a group of others. We spent probably close to 3.5, 4 years just in training on simulators and just exactly, how a simulator, an actual simulator for these aircraft worked, and the new designs as they came along. After they thought that we were trained sufficiently, then we were asked to do another project, which was more or less in my field as mechanical design. That was to join metal together without glue, nuts, or any adhesives, so forth, for aircraft purposes. The indication was to make the aircraft lighter. Okay. This of course was several years going on. In the meantime, of course, security classifications were going on, as far as we were concerned, and just the individuals that were going to work on these particular projects before going to the actual facility where I had done this activity. We developed this particular process of joining this material. It took quite some time, over a period of about 4 years. And then it was indicated to us that we'd go on a special project in New Mexico, which we did. And it was about 3 or 4 years after we had gotten there that we found out that these were simulators that we would be engineers on simulators for flying discs. Those one particular project they worked on associated with that disc was several years, of course. It's very time-consuming in a translation of scientific data as provided to us by the grays, a specific type of gray. As this information was given to our scientists and various different engineers that we had no association with, but they were doing what they call a copy engineering. The copy engineering was a process where they had taken an item or a portion of the craft and they were disassembling it, writing their procedures and identifying certain things as they took it apart and how it related to from their science to our science, and could we use that. I spoke in a little lecture here a while back that no average pilot could fly a flying disc because it was so complicated and so foreign to the individual pilot that there would be no way that he'd be able to hop in one even if they gave it to him and said, here, fly this. Consequently, what we did, we took their avionics and transferred it to our science and our technology and used the avionics that we know of as far as aircraft is concerned. The basic principles in all this, as far as the avionics was concerned, was no different than a regular aircraft that we have. If you understand that, say for example, a fighter aircraft, it's much different than a flying disc. There were certain situations that we had to resolve, and basically we only looked at a couple different things because the flying disc only flies in about 3 different positions, and that is at 65 degrees, flat horizontal, and possibly vertical. But it was very difficult to fly vertical. The avionics that we developed for that was for the 65 degrees, pitch and yaw, and flat flight.
Did you ever see a disc by yourself?
I saw a disc from a distance.
Can you describe
Not
it?
up close.
Can you describe it?
If I was describing a disc for you so you'd understand what we were looking at, if you did see the Bob Lazar poster, very, very similar. This facility I was worked at is I'd say, as far as secrecy is concerned, is much tighter than possibly even Nellis here and some of the other facilities, in this country. The entrance and the locations and the scenario on say, hey guys, here this is, this is what the ship looks like. It's okay. That's what the ship looks like. As far as entering the ship, no. But that was a disc.
How far away was it?
Oh, I was, say, 10 or 15 feet away.
Was it flying or standing on the ground?
It was just sitting on the ground, on its belly.
What did you feel in the moment when you saw it? What was your impression of it?
I had, my impression was, as an engineer, was just great.
Have you ever seen any aliens?
We were introduced to grays that were associated with the project, but they were, I could say that in the time that I spent, maybe I've seen the grays a half a dozen times or more, but no more than 10 times, I think. But they were on, the reason that we saw them was actually for us to get used to being associated with them, okay? It's no different than, say, going to Africa and seeing a bunch of pygmies and, looking at those people for a while, and then, this is a little different than that, but it's the same situation where you're seeing something that's a little bit different than us sitting in this room, talking right now, with their features and their makeup and that kind of thing.
The conclusion that I have made from this is kind of a tentative conclusion, and it's in several parts. Number one, the United States Air Force is interested in any foreign objects that are invading our skies. They would be foolish if they did not conduct a serious investigation of what appears to be superior technology in order to do an estimate of the situation. That's point number one. Number two is, over a period of time, they could have progressed quite far in this study of this technology. Far enough that I believe brings us around to point three, and that is you recruit your best minds from where? The aerospace industry to work on highly classified, or what they call black projects, in order to see if we could duplicate or develop this technology for ourselves. Because what every military wants is superiority, an advantage over the enemy. And of course, this kind of technology would offer us an incredible advantage over almost any enemy, at least that could be found on Earth.
Was extraterrestrial technology already used for secret military projects?
I think it's entirely possible. The sources I have say that that's the reason that we were studying alien hardware in the first place. Wreckage from Roswell and other crash sites is so we can figure how it worked and have a military advantage over our adversaries. Could be the Black Manta, could be the Aurora, could be stealth technology. One of the things we learned in Russia is that they were studying UFOs for incorporation into their stealth program, and they also studied UFOs for incorporation into their SDI program. So if it was going on there, chances are very good that it was going on here as well.
The piece of UFO lore or information that really sticks the closest to home was a letter from a very close friend of mine who wrote a letter to Ben Rich. Ben Rich is the retired president of the Lockheed Advanced Development Company, the people that brought you stealth, that brought you the SR-71, the U-2. Ben was asked, in a letter, do you believe in UFOs? And he wrote back to my friend that yes, both Kelly, referring to Kelly Johnson, the founder of the Skunk Works, and I are firm believers in UFOs. Well, this got John Andrews very, very excited, so he wrote another letter back to Ben. He said, please explain, please clarify. We're talking about two categories of UFOs, both man-made and extraterrestrial. And Ben wrote back again on his letterhead, handwritten, which you have a copy of, saying yes, UFOs do exist, both man-made and extraterrestrial, and we refer to them as unfunded opportunities, and he underlines the UFO.
Are these super secret test flights with recovered UFOs for real? Do U.S. government scientists really investigate extraterrestrial technology? We wanted to find out the truth, test the claims. Following Bob Lazar's recommendation, we drove out to the Black World on December 2nd, 1992, together with an ABC television camera crew. First, we waited near the black mailbox at the Groom Lake access road. Then, followed by a black unmarked Ford Bronco of the Wackenhooth Special Security, we changed our location to the Campfire Hill, an elevation on the roadside closer to the base. It was a Wednesday night, and shortly after sunset, at about 6:15 p.m., the first mysterious flying objects appeared.
Okay, got it.
Fall down, stop blowing. You know a signal flare, military signal flare?
Groupie, I got it on tape.
Yeah. Awesome.
I don't know.
There it is. Heads up, there it is. I don't know, maybe. Okay.
Now it's gone.
Flares? Aerial maneuvers or test flights of extraterrestrial spacecraft? One thing is sure. Their flight characteristics were more than unconventional. Our eyewitnesses were convinced.
I saw, well, right over the horizon there, as most of us said so far, I saw a light come up over the horizon, probably a few degrees over the horizon, and it broke into first 2 lights, then 3 lights, and then it seemed to string them all together, kind of like a string of pearls or beads. And there seemed to be a connection as the light jumped from one position to the next. And it was kind of an orange-yellow color. And it seemed to be sort of swirling around at the same time. It wasn't a straight directional thing. It's kind of like they were going like this a little bit, you know.
The first thing that was interesting we saw along this ridge out here were a series of white blinking lights that seemed to be, as we looked through binoculars, the same light or several lights that were moving real rapidly around the sky, blinking. Very unusual.
All right.
Yeah.
The one that seems to be attracting the most attention is the one we saw out that direction that had a strange color and seemed to split. Describe that one for me.
Yeah, well, it was an orangish red light that was rather intense, and it seemed to split off into different pieces at one point and come back together again. And I think that was the most interesting aspect of that. We've seen a lot of interesting things tonight.
What was that they saw in the skies above Nevada? We'll try and have some answers next. A big UFO convention came to an end in Las Vegas last night, and afterwards, naturally, some of the members went out in the desert to search for UFOs. A news crew went along, too, and sure enough, it wasn't long before a mysterious, unidentified object appeared. Not too surprising, somewhere up there, you see it, because this patch of desert is right near a military test site. This looked like no aircraft lights that any of these folks had ever seen.
This was a bona fide UFO sighting?
I think it was, yeah. And UFO means unknown flying object, and this definitely was nothing I've ever seen before.
Was it a bird? Was it a plane? Was it the Aurora, the secret plane? We don't know. More to come, I'm sure, and the Air Force is not saying anything as usual.
Oh, fascinating. You have a good weekend, of course, all of you. Good night, everybody.